Welcome to Aurora Connects. This is episode 13 for June 19th, 2020, the mayor of Berkeley. We'd like to acknowledge that today is the Juneteenth commemoration of the final enslaved Africans receiving word of the Emancipation Proclamation in Galveston, Texas. And there are nationwide commemoration celebrations going on, and we just wanted to name that. I'm Monique Williams, Associate Artistic Director of Aurora Theater, and as always, I'm joined by Artistic Director Josh Costello. Hey, Josh.
Hey, Don.
How's it going today, Josh?
I'm okay. I'm in the theater again today, which is always a treat these days.
I snuck in yesterday. I needed to get my W-2.
All right.
Because taxes are due, everyone. So every week I have a quote. And this week is no different. And I just learned before we went on the air that Josh is not familiar with this play. So I feel especially proud of myself that I'm stumping Josh. So today's quote comes from A Day of Absence by Douglas Turner Ward, who is the founder of the Negro Ensemble Company. And this is the character of the mayor speaking. Gentlemen, this is a grave predicament indeed. It pains me to surrender priority of our state's rights credo, but it is in my solemn task and frightening duty to inform you, we have no other recourse. Oh gosh, sorry, I blew that. I'm gonna back up a little bit.
That's all right.
Gentlemen, this is a grave predicament indeed. It pains me to surrender priority of our state's right credo, but it is in my solemn task and frightening duty to inform you that we have no other recourse but to seek outside help for deliverance. That is the complete quote. Technology, right? So this play, Josh,
please tell me.
Is a political satire about a southern town where all the Black folk disappear for a day. And a similar film was made maybe 10, 15 years ago called A Day Without a Mexican.
Yep.
So it's in that same vein. And this is the character of the mayor speaking that they're going to need to bring in some national help to figure out where all the Black folk went. And I thought how witty of me, because we are joined by the mayor of Berkeley today to have a character of a mayor speak. And also in honor of Juneteenth, I thought a play that kind of takes a little look at Black liberation and what that might look like was a good idea. So now you know, and you should
now
read this
I know.
play.
I will. Thank you.
The first non-musical play I ever did at Berkeley High School in 1994.
Nice.
Great. So today, friends, we are joined by the mayor of Berkeley. Josh, why don't you go ahead and introduce us to our guest?
Yeah, I will. First, I want to say real quick that you can comment on the Facebook page or in the YouTube chat room, and you can email us at connects@auroratheater.org. You can listen on Stitch, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Please hit like and subscribe and comment and ask us questions. Mayor McGinn, welcome to Aurora Connects.
Thank you for having me.
We're so glad to see you. I'd love to hear you start by telling us how you ended up in Berkeley. And you're from Fresno, right? Is that correct?
Actually, I was born in Fresno, but grew up in San Francisco.
Grew up in San Francisco, okay. And you went to UC Berkeley. And how did you end up as getting into politics?
Well, before I talk about my story, I wanted to acknowledge what Don acknowledged, which is today is Juneteenth.
Yeah.
This is the 155th anniversary of the end of slavery and the Emancipation Proclamation, which people in Texas did not find out about until months after the Emancipation Proclamation was issued. And just looking 155 years later, we know that racial injustice still exists throughout our society. In fact, every institution in our society. And slavery and discrimination are sadly the foundation upon which this country was built, and still exists to this day in policing, in housing, in education, in growing income inequality, and sadly, is a challenge here in our own community. A progressive city that really believes in racial justice and social justice, And so it's these issues that motivated me to run for mayor, and which I'm working on, and happy to talk about some of our work, not only responding to the Black Lives Matter movement, and for the movement for transformation of safety and law enforcement in our country, but also the broader work we're doing around social justice and social equity in our community. But I am the son and grandson of migrant farm workers, and my father and grandfather worked in the fields of the Central Valley and lived in labor camps, and faced exploitation. And I remember hearing about the stories of their challenges growing up. It made me angry that the people that harvest the food that we eat are some of the poorest and most exploited people in our society. And really sort of inspired me to want to do something, not only about the rights of farm workers, but the rights of all people. And so I've been a political activist my entire life, actually, going back to when I was 5 years old, learning about various social movements. At that time, there was the fight against apartheid in South Africa, and the unjust imprisonment of Nelson Mandela, and social movements throughout the world, the fight for democracy in China, and workers' rights here in the United States. And those sort of movements inspired me. And I remember my parents telling me that, and growing up in a working class household, my parents really worked hard to provide a roof over our head and food for my sister and I. And I remember my parents telling us that even though we have very little, we have a responsibility to give back, and that there are people that are even less fortunate than us. And so it's that sort of spirit of social responsibility, and just my passion to make social change happen. That's sort of been a driving force my entire life. And growing up in San Francisco, I got involved in the mid-90s in a campaign to name a street after my hero, Cesar Chavez. And we were successful in naming a street after Cesar Chavez. And I felt it was really important that young people, young brown people particularly, knew about the work of this man, who launched a international movement for the rights of farm workers and the rights of Latinos in our country. And also just the fact that one person can make a difference despite all odds, despite the government and agribusiness and all the money, and the power of the state and the courts trying to stop him. He was able to organize some of the most oppressed people in our society to fight back and to fight for themselves. And he's an inspiration to me. So I've been involved in a variety of different social movements, tenants' rights, labor rights, environmental issues. And hearing about Berkeley and just the proud tradition of political activism here in Berkeley, going back to the 1960s, is really what sort of inspired me and compelled me to come to Berkeley and attend UC Berkeley. And fast forward now, I'm really honored to serve as mayor of this amazing city in this transformative moment. And I really think that we have an opportunity here in Berkeley to really make progressive and transformative and meaningful change happen on all these issues, whether it's racial justice, health inequities, the housing crisis. I really think that, in Berkeley, what we do makes a difference. We're not a big city, but we have a very loud and important voice that people listen to throughout the world. And I think now more than ever, our voice needs to be heard.
Well, let's talk about those transformations you're talking about, because you made an announcement yesterday about policing in Berkeley and the role of the police. And I'd love to hear you talk a little bit more about that. Can you tell us what that's all about?
Well, there's no question that we do not need such a big police force to provide safety for our community. And we need to have a conversation of what is safety? What does safety mean to African Americans? What does safety mean to Latinos who are disproportionately being stopped by our police in Berkeley? How can we provide safety in all forms? And that's just not, responding to violent crime and serious crime, but how can we support the safety and security, health and economic security of all people? And I really do think that this growing movement for transforming our criminal justice system and our approach to safety, that we must meet the moment. And I've gotten thousands of emails and phone calls from Berkeley residents asking, what are we going to do to respond to this growing movement? And in Berkeley, 44% of our general fund budget is our police department budget. And of the personnel costs, public safety represents 60%. So not only is it not sustainable to have such a large police department for our city budget, and that's money that's going away from money for affordable housing, mental health outreach and services, public health, restorative justice programs, but also we do not need over-policing in our community. We need the right approach to public safety. And I'm really inspired by what Minneapolis is doing, where they're saying that they're going to transform their whole approach to public safety, that the police department as they know it will no longer exist. And I think we don't need a police department. We need a public safety department. And that needs to be multifaceted. It needs to not only just focus on when there is a very serious violent crime that you need somebody to respond to, you need to send the right person to respond to that. But police do not need to be giving parking tickets and pulling people over. And they do not need to be, dealing with quality of life issues.
I saw a statistic that 35% of the calls the Berkeley Police Department responds to involve someone with mental health issues.
Yes, that's been the statistic over the years. And our mental health system is broken, and we do not need law enforcement to respond to people who are in crisis on our streets. We need trained mental health clinicians. We need people to get access to services. I think that's a better investment than paying for more police officers. It's a better investment to have homeless outreach workers to go out on the streets and engage with people who are experiencing homelessness, to connect them to shelter and services. It's a better investment to pay for expanding shelter and services for people who do not have housing. It's a better investment to build housing to end homelessness. So we will be launching in Berkeley starting this July a conversation around what it means what safety means in Berkeley, and to transform our approach to public safety and in a variety of areas, to address the issue of militarization of our police, to address the issue of so much money going into our police department, and are there different models that we can look at? I think we should create a Department of Transportation, for example, so that the parking enforcement and traffic enforcement, that's all done in a separate department, a non-sworn department. Looking at creating an office of racial equity in the city of Berkeley. It's going to guide all of our work around issues of racial equity. So we want to look at all these different issues, and it's got to be we have to engage the entire community, but particularly those communities that have been most impacted by the police department. That must be our priority. That's one of many things that we're working on. We're looking at short-term changes and long-term changes. Short-term changes, how we address police use of force, including control holds. That should not happen in Berkeley. We have on the ballot this November a ballot measure to create an independent police accountability board that the voters of Berkeley will be considering. But long-term, while we're discussing what those changes look like, it's got to be an inclusive process. But it is a process that I am intending to launch with the goal of saying that we will not have a police department as we know it, but it will be something new and different that is right for Berkeley, right for our needs, and something that's more focused on a model that is not only more sustainable fiscally, but also is more just for our community.
And you're saying that there'll be a role to play for the public and for members of the marginalized groups to have input into this whole process of rethinking how the police will work. Is that right?
Yes.
That's great.
And so, we're not the only city in the United States to do this. Minneapolis just a few weeks ago launched their process. They over the next year are going to do this major transformational conversation and work. And I think Berkeley should follow suit. And there's some that say that defunding the police is unrealistic. We actually are looking at shifting money out of our police budget to expand funding for mental health and homeless services as part of our budget conversation right now. But what we fundamentally need is real transformative change, and that's the conversation we'll be having.
Mayor Aregin, you touched on so many vital and important things. I just want to make sure we give you an opportunity. Are there other parts of your overall vision for the city of Berkeley that you haven't touched on yet?
Sure. I mean, I ran for mayor because I was deeply concerned about the growing divide in our city. I was concerned about people of color and lower income residents being pushed out of our city due to rising housing costs. The wealth gap is increasing in our community. And we're a proud city with a long tradition of progressive leadership. But the fact that these divides exist and that we have one of the largest racial achievement gaps in our public schools out of any city in the state of California, the fact that housing is more expensive in Berkeley than many other communities in the United States, and the fact that depending on where you live and the color of your skin, you're more likely to be arrested, to have serious health disparities, and limited access to jobs and opportunity. That is not who we are as a city. And if we are to truly realize not only Berkeley's identity, but its vision as a progressive and equitable city, we have to tackle these issues and have these difficult conversations and address them once and for all. So that's why I ran. And my focus is really creating a Berkeley that is equitable, affordable, and sustainable. Making sure that issues of housing affordability continue to be a priority, racial and social equity and economic justice, and also environmental sustainability, addressing the global challenge of climate change. So those have been my priorities, and certainly the national conversation around police reform and racial justice is one element of some of the work that we've been engaged in and that we must continue to work on.
That's great.
I'm curious. Oh.
Go ahead, Don.
Okay. I just was wondering, in terms of that vision for the city and for our community, what role do you see the arts as playing, or what role can the arts play in achieving some of those goals?
A very important role. Most people do not know that the arts is one of the most important business sectors in our city. We have about 155 arts organizations in Berkeley, and they contribute, with all the people that come to our amazing live performance venues like the Aurora Theater, our visual and performing arts organizations, contribute millions of dollars to our economy. And so I see the arts not only just as an important economic stimulus for our city, but also really critical to the intellectual and cultural vitality of our city. And we know right now with COVID-19 that our arts organizations are struggling because you cannot have large events. And so I'm sure we'll talk about COVID-19 and the city's plans on COVID-19. But I felt it was important, as a result of COVID-19 and the shelter-in-place orders that were put in place, that the city do something to provide some economic support and relief for our arts nonprofits and small businesses. And so we launched the Berkeley Relief Fund right around the time that the shelter-in-place order took effect in March. We've raised $1.3 million in private donations from Berkeley residents and local businesses. And we've been able to provide substantial grants to arts nonprofits in Berkeley, as well as to our small businesses, to at least provide some support, knowing that they've seen a very significant reduction in income. And we really want to demonstrate to them that the city really cares and wants to see you get through this, because you're so important to not just our economy, but also just to our whole existence as a city. What would Berkeley be without our amazing restaurants? What would Berkeley be without our small businesses? What would Berkeley be without our amazing nonprofits like the Aurora Theater? That's part of what makes Berkeley so special, and we need to treasure that. We need to support that.
Yeah, we were a recipient of one of those relief grants from the city of Berkeley, and we're very, very grateful. It makes a big difference for sure as we're trying to navigate this time. What questions do you have for us about Aurora? I don't think you've seen a lot of shows at Aurora, but we want to get you in here. What do you want to know about us and what we do?
Well, I'm just curious how you're doing, and whether you're besides these discussions that you've been having every week, which are great.
Mhm.
Are you having, live streams or, I know that some performing arts organizations have either rebroadcast prior performances or have actually done live streams for
Mhm.
their patrons. So I'm curious about how you're using technology to kind of, continue to provide arts and culture to our community.
Yeah, so we just announced that we are shifting to a different model for the upcoming season. We're not going to reopen the theater until it's safe for us to do so, and we don't know when that's going to be. And so rather than announce a bunch of shows and cancel them one after the other, we're just saying we're going to reopen when it's safe. We'll announce our next live performance in our space once we know we can do it, and then go from there. And in the meantime, our mission, we see ourselves as being the storyteller for the community, right? We want to tell the stories that speak to the present moment and that help our community understand our world and our place in it. And so our world is changing really fast right now, right? We're going through a huge transformation because of the pandemic. And then also, I really hope that we're going through a transformation as a society in terms of racial justice right now as well. So I'm not super interested in streaming video of old performances. We don't have a lot of that video anyway, so it's sort of moot. But I'm much more interested in how can we tell stories that speak to this moment going forward. And so we've commissioned 3 local playwrights, Jonathan Spector, Cleavon Smith, and Lauren Gunderson, who were our guests last week, to create an original audio drama, which we'll be recording and then releasing for our members and for single ticket buyers in the fall. And we have other things in the works as well. We have a bunch of new plays under development that we already had under development before this started. We're going to continue working on those and offer live streams of even over Zoom of actors reading drafts of these plays out loud with the playwrights and the directors, and offering an opportunity for the audience to participate in a discussion about the themes of these plays, so that when we're able to open up again, we'll have we'll have the new stories. We are, I feel like our playwrights are members of our community who are tasked with telling the stories that help our community come together and move forward. And I really like that we're going to continue to be on the vanguard of that, even when we can't gather in our space. So that's what we're doing right now.
Awesome.
Yeah, we'll see. It's tough. I mean, to be clear, like the financial situation is really tough, and we're really depending on grants from the city of Berkeley, from various foundations. We got a PPP loan from the federal government as part of the stimulus program. We are furloughing our staff in various ways, some people more than others, and trying to figure out how we can get through a year where we have substantially reduced income. And it's tricky, but we're our landlord has been very generous so far. We're hoping that will continue, and we really want to be here on the other side, serving this community. I grew up here. Dawn grew up here. I'm raising my kids here. This is home, and I really I'm really proud to be part of a theater company that's part of the community that I care about so much.
We're proud that you're in Berkeley.
Let's talk about COVID, since that's sort of come up a couple of times now. What are the next steps for the city of Berkeley in fighting against COVID and getting us on a track to reopening? I'm not one of these people who is pushing, much as I would love to reopen soon, I want to wait until it's really actually safe for people. But I'm curious what you see the timeline as being right now, and where we're at in terms of moving through the stages towards being able to lift the restrictions and open back up.
Well, we're in phase 3 right now, and we're sort of predicting phase 4. And this is sort of a chart the city has released, kind of showing the different sort of stages towards reopening. And we're trying to do this thoughtfully based on the data, and to also make sure that as we're starting to open up certain types of activities, that we're not seeing a huge spike in cases or hospitalizations, because sadly, until we have a vaccine that is widely available, or at least therapeutics that can help manage the severity of the symptoms, the risk is real and it will be with us, even when we do, phase in lots of different types of activities. So we've been slowly transitioning, and I know it's been really challenging for the Berkeley community, and certainly challenging for our nonprofit organizations and our local businesses, but it is making progress. I think compared to some of our neighboring cities in Alameda County, we have not seen such a huge spike in cases. And so because of that, it does behoove us to try to move as responsibly and quickly as possible to start reopening our economy. So today, and I'll be going to a local restaurant today, sitting outside with my face mask, but we are now allowing outdoor dining. And I actually introduced a proposal, which we are working to start implementing, to look at closing streets and public spaces to allow outdoor dining and business activity to be done safely. I not only think it will be just good for our city to get people, out in our streets, in our commercial districts, to be able to do so in a socially distanced way, but I think it's going to be really critical for particularly our restaurants and cafes to be able to open up safely and to be able to stay in business. So we're beginning to see the beginning of that. And then, I don't have a date, but, my expectations probably the end of the year or is when we would allow larger in-person events. We will be allowing events of under 100 people before we allow events for over 100 people. We're looking at what other states and communities are doing and how they're doing it responsibly. I'm in touch with a lot of our music venues and other live performance venues who are really eager to understand what that timeline looks like. And it may mean that we don't have 200-person shows for a while, but maybe half capacity. So these are all things that we're exploring. We've launched a series of listening sessions with I don't know if we've had our arts sector listening session yet, but we've been meeting with all sorts of different business sectors, getting input about what's going on the ground, how is COVID impacting them, what are some of their thoughts about how we can safely reopen, and that's going to inform the orders and the protocols that we're going to put in place. So we are making a lot of progress. I think our infection rate of those tested, and we've had about 5,000 tests that have been conducted of Berkeley residents, and we're working to increase our testing capacity. We actually have 2 testing sites now, one that is available for anyone to get tested. And so if you would like to get tested, whether you're symptomatic or not, you can go to the City of Berkeley's website, cityofberkeley.info/COVID-19, and you could sign up to get tested. And we want to make those resources also available to the staff and employees of our nonprofits as well as our essential businesses, so that we can make sure they get tested as well. So testing is critical, making sure that we're not seeing a whole lot of hospitalizations, and then just thinking about how we do this safely. And I think people know there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and I think we are making progress. And of those 5,000 tests, we have a little under 3% positive rate, which is actually really good for Berkeley, a city of 120,000 residents. So once again, I think that means that we need to continue to start reopening, but we got to do it based on the data, and we know that decisions are or are not being made without science and without data. And look what's happened. The fact that the United States has the largest rate of infection of any country in this world is if I may, if I have a soapbox, is a failure of this president and this federal administration. It is unacceptable that that thousands and thousands of people have died due to his negligence, and we need a comprehensive federal strategy to address this. It can't be just up to cities like Berkeley to have to figure this out. But we've been doing what we can to keep our community safe. But we know that people are ready to go back to some sense of normalcy. And the reality is that things are not going to be normal for a while. This is the new normal. Wearing a face covering is the new normal. It's going to be that way for a while until a vaccine is widely available. So we just have to continue to make progress, be responsible and thoughtful about it. So we don't have a date yet on arts, large gatherings or sort of live performance venues. But my expectation would be sometime at the end of the year.
Okay.
Mayor, you've said so many rich things, and it's got so many things bubbling up for me. The first is I want to share that I did have the fortune to sit in on a listening session with the vice mayor and several city council members, and that was really informative. Something that she shared was that 35% of Berkeley's public space is dedicated to parking. I hope I'm not misquoting her, but I know that as you talk about outdoor dining and summer camps need for space, that that this idea that maybe we block off some streets sounds very appealing to me. But I live in Oakland, so so I guess I shouldn't speak on behalf of the citizens of Berkeley. But that sort of dovetails for me into the intersection of the number of demonstrations and protests that are happening in Berkeley. I did grow up in Berkeley. It's where I got my activist spirit. I remember walking out. My first walkout was when we were going into the Gulf Wars and then the Rodney King riots. I remember all those things. I want to say fondly, but they're not fond memories. They're just memories. And I wonder, what is the city of Berkeley doing to support the Black Lives Matter movement?
Well, one thing that we did, one of my colleagues, Ben Bartlett, actually organized, I think, the largest peaceful protests that we've had in Berkeley in quite some time. This was several weekends ago. And we had, I'd say 5,000 or more Berkeley residents who took the streets, and then there was a simultaneous demonstration that was happening where the students from the Black Student Union at UC Berkeley were also marching onto downtown Berkeley, and so we all just kind of converged, and it was just one really incredible, beautiful moment. And I was just so proud of Berkeley, and also just the fact that we were giving space for people to talk, and people were listening, and people are angry, justifiably so. I mean, what happened to George Floyd is despicable, and sadly, he's not the only person, and we hope he is the last person who is going to be, killed unjustly at the hands of police. But I remember in 2014 taking to the streets when we had large, I think, several days of protests in Telegraph area in downtown Berkeley in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement. And I remember explicitly one evening when the police shot tear gas and fired rubber bullets at protesters, and being very angry about that happening in Berkeley. That's not how we should respond to protests in our city. We have a proud, rich tradition of social justice and political activism and protests, peaceful protests. And I remember in 2014, after a number of high-profile killings at the hand of police, people taking the streets throughout the country, and just there was a groundswell of support for change, and a lot of change didn't happen. And so fast forwarding to now, things have to change. And I really do think this is a turning point in the history of our country. So how we demonstrate our support to the Black Lives Matter movement is through action, through looking at, transforming our approach to public safety, addressing racial disparities in policing in Berkeley, by supporting the demands of our African-American community for things like an African-American Holistic Resource Center, which is a really exciting visionary concept to have a resource center in South Berkeley to serve the needs of our African-American community, that is run by and has been conceptualized by the African-American community, by addressing the issues of housing affordability, by addressing the issues of the disparities and academic outcomes in our schools. So I think I want to listen to what the needs and demands are of our African American community and be an ally and support them. I don't want to tell them what I think needs to be done, but I am hearing those demands for change, and we have to heed that call. And I think we will. And I think the people of Berkeley want that, and now's the time to do it.
Am I right that you made a change to the policy around the use of tear gas by the police?
Yes, we actually, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, we banned tear gas in crowd control. And I think people know throughout the history of Berkeley, one very vivid moment was the People's Park protests, where helicopters were releasing tear gas all over the UC Berkeley campus. And certainly, as I mentioned, 2014, when we had a series of demonstrations in Berkeley in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement, the police used protests then. I think they actually depleted their entire stockpile of tear gas in one day. And so I think the city council just a couple of weeks ago said tear gas is not even allowed in international war, shouldn't be allowed for crowd control. And this was also in response to Oakland police using tear gas to actually break up some demonstrations in their city. And we've said enough is enough. We don't think this is right. This isn't a tool that our police should have. And so we have voted to prohibit it permanently. That's just one that's not a significant change, as significant as some of the other things that we're talking about, but that at least is something to demonstrate to our community that we are not going to create a chilling effect for people to engage in peaceful demonstration. That we believe very strongly in First Amendment activity, and people should be allowed to engage in peaceful protests. That's, I think, a fundamental principle behind our democracy, the right for people to speak out and to redress against the government and to demand change.
I love how, in terms of the space for peaceful protest and investigating how we police and law enforcement and dealing with issues around COVID-19, that we keep coming back to the issue of public safety and how really that is an umbrella for all of these things, and that really is a place where we should be using our resources to greater effect, this idea of public safety. Josh, it looks like we got a couple of questions from YouTube. I'm looking at one here that says, how do we support social workers to be able to intervene when needed, but not perpetuate the same culture and systems that make the police so dangerous?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is that it should be social workers that respond to somebody who's in a crisis rather than police officers. That's not the most effective use of our law enforcement personnel. They're not trained to do that kind of work. And what people need is they need the de-escalation and need care and compassion. And what we have is we have a broken mental health system, and a law enforcement approach. Criminalization is not the solution. It's not going to solve the problem. So a harm reduction model is what needs to be put forward. Not only people who are in distress, who are in a mental health crisis, people who have substance abuse issues. Harm reduction, should be the approach that we take, and one that is really focused on de-escalation and care and compassion, and recognizing that what we need is a public health response to a situation. Now, there may be situations where things escalate and they do become unsafe, and a police officer may need to come and intervene and assist, but the first person who responds should not be a police officer. And the fact, once again, that, as was stated, 35% of the calls to our police department relate to somebody who is in a mental health crisis. That's just not the right allocation of resources. They're not the right people who should be responding.
All right. We're starting to get towards the end of our conversation, but I want to ask you something. This is not on our list of questions, but I just thought about it. I'm curious. What's your plan, Mayor Jesse? Are you gonna? What's next for you after being mayor of Berkeley? Are you gonna go on and become governor of California and president of the United States? And what's the next step for you?
Well, it's really such an honor to be mayor of the city. And to represent our rich history, and to be mayor at this time. And I've been thinking about this, this is my fourth year in office. I was elected the same night as Donald Trump's election as president. And just all of everything that's happened in our country, Berkeley has really been kind of a center of the resistance against the Trump administration. And we had a series of events in Berkeley where white nationalists and white supremacists came to Berkeley to antagonize us and to threaten our community. And then power shutoffs and COVID-19. And so it's been a very transformative time. But I think this is the moment where, where fundamental change is going to happen in our country. I think we can look back 20 years from now, and the things that we do now are going to really set the future for not just Berkeley, but the entire United States. And what happens in Berkeley travels across the state and across the country and across the world. Many social movements started here, so I'm always mindful of that and the opportunities we have here to make change happen. But I love being mayor. I plan on doing this at least for now, and giving every single day to make a difference in my community. And so that's my plan.
It's a very, very, very good answer. Very. You've got this down for sure. Thank you so much. I want to ask before we go. We're thinking a lot about looking forward, and that's a sort of big theme that we're having right now in our planning for the future. That we're looking that we want to focus on the future and on what the world is going to be like. And so I just want to ask, what are you looking forward to?
That's a good question. Well, I am looking forward to a day when, it is safe for us to go back to the way that we have lived. And that it's going to take some time. It's going to be challenging. We have to really be patient. But I'm so amazed and impressed at how our community has really rallied during this time. And I'm hopeful that at the end of this period, whether it's this next year, that we can look back and say that we are finally seeing the foundation of systemic racism being broken in our country, and that we are seeing meaningful change happen, and that it's not just talk, but that we know that we're at a turning point. And so I think once again we're at a really important moment in our country, and how are we going to meet the moment? How are we going to rise to the occasion? And I think we can do that here in Berkeley. We've done a great job in how we've dealt with COVID-19, and I think we have a moral responsibility to meet the moment in addressing the demands for ending systemic racism, not just in our country, but right here in Berkeley as well.
Thank you.
Agreed. Well, I would like to remind our viewers at home, if they recall, a couple weeks back, we had Vincent Terrell Durham on our show. And tonight there is a reading of
labor unions led the way, marching
Black
from
Boys and Prairie Fringed Orchids. We are doing that in partnership with over 40 other Bay Area theaters have contributed to making this reading happen. It's free, but you do need to make a reservation to watch it via Zoom at playground-sf.org/Juneteenth. I don't know the difference between a backslash and a forward slash, but playground-sf.org/Juneteenth, and make a reservation to watch that Zoom reading of Vincent's play.
And we, as I mentioned earlier, we do have memberships for sale now. You can become a member at Aurora Theater Company and participate in all of the online programming that we have going, as well as if we are able to reopen during the 2020-2021 season, members will receive tickets to all of those productions, and you'll be supporting Aurora Theater Company and our ability to keep telling stories for our community. So please go to our website and purchase a membership. While you're there, you can also donate by hitting the donate button at the top right. We are also asking our supporters to make a video testimonial for us. All you have to do is get out your phone and point it at yourself and say, I am blank. Aurora Theater Company stands for blank, and you can say one word or a short phrase about what Aurora Theater Company stands for, and then end with, I'm looking forward. In fact, Mayor Jesse, would you say that for us right now? Would you do a video testimonial and just say, I'm Mayor Jesse, and Aurora Theater Company stands for, and say what you think we stand for, and then I'm looking forward, and we can use this in our testimonial. Will you do it for us?
Absolutely. Well, I'm Mayor Jesse, and to me, Aurora's Theater stands for transformative, cultural performances and experiences. And I look forward to seeing a show at the Aurora Theater soon, hopefully. So.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So if you want to record a testimonial like that, get out your phone and email it to us at supernova@auroratheater.org. We will be playing our testimonials during Supernova, which is our annual celebration, which has moved online this year on July 13th, and it is free for everybody. So please join us for that.
And as always, if you have questions, comments, please feel free to comment in the comment box on YouTube, Facebook, hit like, subscribe. We love the feedback. We'd love to know what other guests you'd like to have on the show. We hope to host a wide range of guests, from mayor and council members and residents of Berkeley to the artists that work on our stages and design, and the artisans that work backstage. So you have a voice in helping us decide who comes on the show.
And next week, we will have Bay Area artistic directors. We have Pam McKinnon from ACT, Eric Ting from Cal Shakes, and Mina Morita from Crowded Fire joining us next week. Mayor Jesse, thank you so much for talking with us today. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
And thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for staying connected.